Hello there. Welcome to my review of the 7th and last episode of Season 1 of Columbo, Blueprint for Murder. First broadcast on February the 9th, 1972 on NBC. It was written by Stephen Bochco, based on a story by William Kelly. Kelly was born May 27th, 1923 in New York. He earned a master's degree in Irish literature in 1957 and became a literary editor and author soon afterwards. He began writing for the television in the late 60s, accumulating more than 150 credits, including Gunsmoke, Kung Fu, Dukes of Hazzard, and of course Columbo. His best known work was co-writing the screenplay and story for the Peter Weir film Witness, which won him an Oscar. He died on February the 3rd, 2003. He was 73. The episode was the first and only directorial effort of Peter Falk, although rumours persisted he directed parts of Season 2 opener Etude in Black. The episode begins with a car tearing down a street and cutting someone off to park outside a building. We follow a pair of shoes to the desk of a receptionist, who exclaims Mr. Williamson. Mr. Williamson is played by Forrest Tucker. Tucker was born February the 12th, 1919 in Indiana. He began performing at age 14 and worked in vaudeville before moving to Hollywood. He appeared in more than 100 films, starting out as a character actor before gaining leading roles. He took a break from acting to enlist in the US Army during World War II, and after the war returned to Hollywood and appeared in such films as Hellfire and Sands of Iwo Jima. He also appeared on stage and in television, starring as Sergeant Morgan O'Rourke in the comedy series F Troop, and reuniting with F Troop co-star Larry Storch in the 1975 series The Ghostbusters. He died on October the 25th, 1986. He was 67. Mr. Williamson demands to see him, and the secretary says he's not there. Williamson storms into his office, which is empty, and sees a model of a town. This is the proposed Williamson City, and Williamson is not happy with it. He smashes up the model and demands to know where he is. The secretary says he's at the construction site. Williamson arrives at the construction site demanding to see the he in question, Elliot Markham. Markham is an architect with some grand designs. Williamson is furious about the proposed city, which Markham and Williamson's wife agreed upon while he was away. He thinks he's being conned. Markham is unable to contact Williamson's wife, but is relieved that Williamson won't be able to reach her either. Williamson is at his ranch, and when he gets into his car to leave, Markham is waiting in the back seat with a gun. He takes Williamson into an outbuilding, but we don't see what happens next. It's very clever, as the assumption is Markham has killed him, but as the episode goes on, we can't necessarily be 100% sure. This is a plot device used again in one of the 90s episodes, but with a different outcome. Markham is played by Patrick O'Neill. Patrick O'Neill was born on September the 26th, 1927 in Florida. He attended military school and later enlisted in the US Air Force. During his service in the Korean War, he directed training films and afterwards studied at the Actors Studio. He mostly worked in television, although he has some success on Broadway. He had starring roles on some short-lived series and guest starred on many different TV shows, including Barnaby Jones, Murder, She Wrote, Route 66 and Dr. Kildare, as well as 2 appearances in Columbo. In film, he appeared as Dale Kober in The Stepford Wives and as Captain Adams in Under Siege, one of his last roles. He was also a successful restaurateur in Manhattan with his wife and his brother. O'Neill died September the 9th, 1994. He was 66. Markham drives Williamson's car to his ranch and packs all of Williamson's clothes and puts them in the boot of the car. He has changed the radio station from country to classical, a detail that on repeat viewing is an obvious clue, but it's not as obvious on first viewing. The next morning, Columbo arrives. He's at the dedication to Markham's latest building at the construction site. There's a funny little scene with a security guard who won't let Columbo in because he thinks he's not got an invite, and the tone continues in this way as Columbo looks for Mrs Williamson at the event. He finds her, but she didn't call the police. Someone called Mrs Williamson, had reported Beau Williamson missing, possibly dead, and they work out it's Beau's first wife, Goldie. Markham and Mrs Williamson assure Columbo that Beau regularly comes and goes, travelling all over the world. We then meet Goldie Williamson, Beau's first wife. She is certain Beau is dead and is incredibly strong-willed. Goldie is played by Janis Paige, and she gives a hell of a performance, eccentric but wholly believable, as the first wife with a better relationship with Beau than the current Mrs Williamson. Janis Paige was born September the 16th, 1922, in Washington. She performed from a young age and moved to Los Angeles after high school, and was hired as a singer in the Hollywood canteen during World War II. After some small success in low-budget musicals, she opted to leave Hollywood and began appearing on Broadway. She returned to Hollywood in 1957 to co-star with Fred Astaire and Sid Charisse in Silk Stockings, followed by the comedy Please Don't Eat the Daisies, and with Bob Hope in Bachelor in Paradise. She also appeared in many television series in guest spots and as recurring characters in shows such as The Rockford Files, Mannix, All in the Family, Trapper John MD, and of course Columbo. Her last on-screen appearance was in Family Law in 2001. She is 99. While with Goldie, Columbo receives a phone call saying they found Beau's car at the airport. He's not yet convinced anything has happened to Beau. At the airport, Columbo is sitting in Beau's car, listening to his country music tape. He notices all the tapes are country, but the radio is tuned to a classical station. He goes to the Williamson home where Goldie and the current Mrs Williamson are arguing about where Beau is. He examines Beau's music collection. It's all country music. And Mrs Williamson confirms that's all he listens to. Columbo also wants to know why Beau has gone away when he has an appointment with his heart specialist. Mrs Williamson happily brags about Williamson City and how Markham has told her that Beau approved of the plans. Columbo then visits Markham's office where he sees the destroyed model and Markham's classical music collection. I think we've reached the point in every episode where Columbo knows exactly who the killer is. The receptionist confirms that Beau is the one who smashed up the model. Markham's story is already unravelling. Columbo goes to visit Markham, teaching at the local university. Columbo immediately drops a big hint that he knows exactly what's up. As Markham is lecturing about the pyramids, and Columbo mentions that if he were to murder anybody, he would be sure to hide the body where no one could ever find it, like the pyramids. He also asks about Beau's anger, and Markham tells a half-truth about Beau's rage subsiding when Markham explained the plans. Columbo prods for more information. Why Beau's name wasn't listed on any flights, and why the car radio was tuned to classical. Markham explains Beau flies under an assumed name, but doesn't answer the radio station question. Columbo visits the construction site, confirms Beau was still angry with Markham, and finds out about when the concrete piles were sunk at the site. He then goes to see Beau's doctor, a cameo from the brilliant John Fiedler, voice for many years of Piglet in Winnie the Pooh. He explains that Beau needs his pacemaker batteries changed, so he would definitely not have missed the appointment. There's a fun little exchange where the doctor warns Columbo off cigars, which lasts for about 5 minutes. Markham and Mrs Williamson are playing tennis, and Mrs Williamson finds Beau's bloodied hat in the bushes, which confuses the hell out of Markham, as he knows it shouldn't be there, but obviously can't let on why he knows that. He eventually works out it must have been Goldie that hid it there, to try and convince Columbo to investigate. He confronts Goldie, and Columbo overhears. Goldie eventually admits it, and Columbo warns her to stop it. It feels like this makes Columbo more suspicious of Markham, as there's no reason for him to get involved unless he doesn't want Columbo investigating. Columbo continues to investigate. At the construction site, he inquires about which concrete pile was poured around the time of Beau's disappearance, and Markham encourages him to dig up said pile. He knows the body isn't there, and so goads Columbo. Columbo tells Markham he knows if Beau dies, Mrs Williamson won't inherit his whole fortune, so won't be able to fund Markham. But with Beau missing, she can. We're then treated to scenes of Columbo trying to get the necessary permits to dig up the pile. He might be peerless at catching murderers, but he can't beat city bureaucracy. He eventually does get the permits, and the next day they dig up the pile, creating great expense for the city and great embarrassment for Columbo, much to Markham's delight, who was invited a film crew there to witness the whole thing. So not only has Columbo disgraced himself, but now Markham is in the clear, and he's able to really dump Beau's body into the pile foundations. After all, who would think of checking the pile twice? Falk is great in these scenes. He looks genuinely shattered that there's no body there, but as it turns out, it's all an act for Markham's benefit. When Markham turns up at the site that night with Beau's body, Columbo is waiting, and Markham is caught red-handed, all because he changed the radio station. This is a really good episode to finish the first series. Once again, all the performances are top-notch. O'Neill is completely unsympathetic as the ego-driven Markham, who murders purely so he can fulfill his self-proclaimed potential of building a whole town. It's a really nasty motive. Paige is great as Goldie, the instigator of the whole investigation, who knows her ex-husband and is the only one who would have been suspicious with his disappearance. Clearly she's still in love with Beau, and Falk is at the top of his game. His performance is perfect Columbo. Outside of the murder he's bewildered and befuddled, but as an investigator he unravels Markham's story by looking at the small incongruities that others might have overlooked. His direction is also really good. None of the experimental shots of earlier episodes, but he still picks some really interesting shots, such as Williamson's and Goldie's first appearances. It's a shame he didn't direct anything else, as he has a talent for it, especially when it came to directing the actors. He manages to extract really strong performances out of all of them. The plot is also strong, with the final reveal of how he catches Markham being really clever. The only real criticism is that it feels a little bit rushed in some places, and it would have been nice to see Columbo interact with Markham a little bit more, and have Mrs Williamson, the current Mrs Williamson, given a little more to do. Other than that, I think it's a really enjoyable episode, and without hesitation I would rate this 4 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.